Good morning and good afternoon, and a warm welcome to Global Child Forum's launch of our benchmark results in the report The State of the Children's Rights in Business 2021. The purpose of today's event is for us to share the findings from our latest benchmark on business and children's rights. We'll also hear the perspectives on this social issue from a corporate representative and a large asset owner. This meeting will be short and informative. The year is coming to an end and Zoom fatigue is a real issue. This meeting will be 45 minutes and we will neither have a Q&A nor a panel debate. This, however, doesn't mean that we won't welcome your interaction, and my colleague will now post our contact details in the chat, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And for those of you who don't know us, Global Child Forum was founded in 2009 by the King and Queen of Sweden with the purpose of bringing together business leaders to raise awareness on children's rights. We focus on assessing and assisting companies in understanding their positive and negative impact on children. One of our contributions is the global benchmark on how companies report on the implementation of children's rights and the business principles. Those principles were launched back in 2012 by UNICEF, Save the Children, and United Nations Global Compact. Then, and even today, in the era of ESG investing and sustainability, there is a lack of comprehensive data sets on social governance in general and children's rights in particular. At the time, in 2012, that was the reason we partnered with Boston Consulting Group, and we have together ever since performed the corporate sector and children's rights benchmark study. The benchmark tracks progress over time on company reporting on children's rights, and during this period, we have benchmarked more than 2,600 companies globally, and we have gathered the largest global set of children's rights and business data. And we make this data available not only to companies, but also to investors, enabling all to assess and compare themselves in relation to peers in different sectors and in different markets. And the study we're here to talk about today is the largest ever done by us, or anyone for that matter. We have benchmarked 832 global companies from 9 sectors representing all regions. We follow a permanent universe of 2,000 companies, the so-called SDG 2000 universe, selected by the World Benchmarking Alliance. We benchmark approximately half of these companies ourselves, and we offer the other half the opportunity to compare themselves to our data through a digital self-assessment tool. The companies that we benchmark are also benchmarked in many other ways by other actors in the collaboration with the World Benchmarking Alliance. And we will hear a little bit more about the results in a couple of minutes, but I just wanted to mention that, interestingly enough, we have noted a positive relationship between a company's profitability and its benchmark score. We found that the leaders category in our study financially outperformed all other groups on the tested metrics. The private sector is also critical in achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And to those of you who are invited today, you are either among the 2,000 companies in the universe of the SDG 2000. You are considered to be the most influential companies in the world in terms of helping the world reach the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Your companies are going to shape the future, and you have a real opportunity to have a positive impact on children's lives through your core business. Invited today, you could also be representing an asset manager or an asset owner, and you probably share our interest in understanding more about which companies are leaders in social governance and which companies that still have some way to go on this important issue. And with that said, I'd like to introduce you to our guests here today. You will soon hear more about 10 years of analyzing our benchmark data from our long-term partner, Andreas Lundmark, Managing Director and Partner at Boston Consulting Group. My colleague and Global Child Forum's Research Manager, Nina Folmer, will follow and give more insights into the results of our latest benchmark. We'll hear the perspective of Åsne Burgess Öjehaug, Social Responsibility Manager at Group Sustainability from Norsk Hydro. She will tell us a little bit more about their experience in working with Global Child Forum and how they have used the benchmark data and some of the other tools that we offer. Rounding up, we will hear from Vibeke Rogan, who is Head of Social Initiative in Norges Bank Investment Management, which currently manages almost 12.5 trillion Norwegian kroner. NBIM, as they are called, has been involved in engagement on children's rights ever since 2008, and Vibeke will reflect on the benchmark data. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Andreas. Take it away.
Thank you. I'm Andreas Lundmark. I'm a partner at the Boston Consulting Group in Stockholm. We've been part of this journey for 10 years. I personally have been part of it for about 7 or 8 years, meaning that I've been part of a couple of the global reports and also the regional reports that we've released in between. When we started this engagement together, we realized that there was really no data available in this space, and the transparency of how companies relate to children's rights was very low. And in our first effort, the response from the corporate sector was also disappointingly low. So I'm really happy to see over the past 10 years how this has helped raise the awareness around these issues and also spurred a really great discussion around this and actions that we can follow up on. We're really happy to see how the benchmark has become increasingly robust and how the conversation around this topic is becoming increasingly relevant now on the top of the agenda for any company and also with investors and this being an integral part of what the company is. We've also increased we've worked together with the Global Child Forum to increase the scope of this and the reach. One way is to work on the sampling methodology from being fairly manual in the beginning to now follow the SDG 2000 universe. And we've also made it more comparable over time so that we can draw conclusions about what happens year by year and what happens by industry, by more consistent selection criteria and a good mix of industries and geographies. So it's become also more useful to highlight issues across the globe. We cover more topics, not just child labors, which was the key focus in the beginning, and the one topic that many companies were aware of and had a plan for, but I think the benchmark has also helped widen the awareness and discussion to a lot of other topics such as workplace, working parents, marketplace, community, and environmental factors that are also impacting children directly or indirectly. We've also added more parameters and can also now follow in more granularity how that differs across industries. And not all parameters are equally relevant for industries. We also worked with how we balance that over time. It's interesting that we started 10 years ago because where we are today, we actually have a very rich data set that now spans 10 years, which is, I think, quite impressive and gives us a really interesting and really powerful tool to follow the development on across industries and across regions. And the timing for this is great. I think we all feel that sustainability and social responsibility and the role that companies play in society is being really put in the focal point and is increasingly nuanced and broad. And having a specific social agenda around children's rights is going to be a must-have. We also can see how ESG issues are growing explosively in the corporate world from being a sort of a minor side issue, I would say, or a side topic that is now a sort of core to brands, to people culture, how to retain talent, and also, as we can hear today, investment strategies. There are even dedicated investment funds only doing ESG investing. So I think where Global Child Forum is today with this benchmark, having been in the game for 10 years, is a highly relevant and thought leader in this space. So and we're just happy to have been a part of that over the years. Thank you. And now.
Thank you, Andreas. So I will try and share a short presentation here. And meanwhile, my name is Nina, as has been said. I'm the research manager, and it's my pleasure and privilege to share with you some of the highlights from the report, The State of Children's Rights in Business. And let's dive straight into it. So as Filippa mentioned earlier, this is the largest benchmark on this topic, and we cover 832 companies in this study. And it's truly global. We cover the whole world and all sectors. And it's the largest companies that we are focusing on based on revenue. The way we do this is with a methodology based on the Children's Rights and Business Principles, as has been said, and we have developed 27 indicators on different areas of where children's rights and business intersect. That we take companies' publicly available information and score it according to these indicators. And a company can receive a score of 0, 5, or 10, depending on what information we find. So a score of 0 means that we haven't found any information or it's not publicly available. A score of 5 means that the topic is covered generally under human rights or sustainability, but children aren't specifically mentioned. And to receive a score of 5, it covers the topic and children are included. The topics are divided into 3 main areas that we call workplace, which covers child labor and family-friendly workplace. Marketplace, which covers marketing, external communications and labeling, and also products and services that are not only safe, but also support children in different ways. And finally, we have community and environment, which looks at the indirect impacts of operations and suppliers. And in all of these areas, we look at 3 main sort of corporate responses that are important to show an integral taking on children's rights in an integral way. And the first step is having a policy or commitment. The second step is to have a rigorous implementation or process to make sure that the words become action. And finally, we look at outcome reporting when it comes to compliance and progress, as well as showing how any remediative or preventive action is being taken on the issue. So that is a little bit of background, just to give you an intro to what we will be looking at. So these are the main things we will be looking at in the following minutes here. The main results of the study shows that there has been a slight improvement since we last did a global study in 2019. So the average score for all companies across all indicators has gone up from 5.1 to 5.4. There is still a bit of a way to go, though, to reach the top score of 10. We also see that a larger share of companies do score above the 5.0 mark, which is encouraging. But at the same time, we see that what we call the leader segments or the high scorers only represent 9% of all of the companies. So we can definitely see more momentum in the top than we're doing at the moment. When we look more in detail on the results, we see that some sectors are leading, some are lagging a bit. And there's also a difference in terms of how many leading or lagging companies are within each sector. In the study, we have also identified some main gaps and opportunities when it comes to issues. So one of the main things we see is that companies are generally very good at environment and climate and reporting and talking about it, and less so when it comes to a social impact, and even less when it comes to connecting the two. And finally, we also see that when it comes to seeing communication, products and services, and children as main stakeholders to this is not being done, and we think this is a lost opportunity, and we'll come back to this. So if we go back to the overall results, as I said, we've seen a slight increase in the average score, and if we look at the sector results, we see that there isn't that big of a difference between the sectors. But healthcare, apparel and retail, food and beverage, technology and telecom, and travel and leisure are slightly leading the pack, whereas basic materials, energy and utilities, financials, and business to business are lagging behind their peers. If we then compare to the 2019 score for the same sectors, we see that the majority have increased, at least slightly, but there are some that are stagnating or potentially going backwards. And again, we see it's the basic materials, energy and utilities, financials and business to business that are sort of trailing behind a little bit here, with exception maybe of financials. And the keen observer might see that sort of the leading sectors here are potentially considered more close to consumer and potentially then also closer to children in their business. But the lagging sectors also have a huge impact on children's rights that is really important. So these companies employ millions of people and have an impact on community and environment. And we also see that it's within these areas that these companies have the weakest disclosures. So that we have something to work on there. As I said, we don't see that many leaders, but there are a few, and some have taken the step from achievers to leaders since the last study. So it can be done. And we also see it's done across different types of sectors. And here are just a few examples of those that improve their scores the most. If you want to see more sector information, we have sector scorecards in the report that you can access. I think my colleague will be sharing a link to the report here as well in the chat. Let's move on. So when it comes to the gaps and opportunities, as I said, in relation to community and environment, when we break down the area results into each individual indicator, we can see that there is a difference between which issues are being reported on by the companies included in the study. So firstly, we can see that children seem to be important to companies. And we know that because of the last bar in this graph here, which covers programs that support children in the community, which is the actually highest scoring indicator in the whole study. So companies spend resources and time on children in the community and think it's important that they get education, healthcare, and a safe development. But it's not being connected to corporate impact. We also see that when it comes to environment, it's also some of the highest scoring indicators. We don't include children specifically in these indicators, but how a company acts when it comes to environment and climate is essential to children. So we see that having an environmental policy and reporting on it is also high scoring indicators, whereas the indicators that covers community impact are lower scoring. And when we talk about community impact, we mean, for example, issues such as how land use impacts children's ability to live and play, their access to education and healthcare, water use and pollution, which have a much more detrimental impact on children than it has on adults at the same level. It can also be issues such as traffic and road safety around operations or logistics. And for example, migration of workforce that can impact the community in different ways. And finally, how a company acts when it is active in conflict areas or disaster-prone districts. When we look at how environment and community issues are being implemented in the organization, we also see that most companies have identified environment as a material issue. The boards are receiving reporting on this or are sort of in charge of these issues, but they're not being connected to impact on children. And given that children are the ones that are the most impacted by environmental and climate change, this is a real gap. And at the same time, we are seeing now increasing demands for climate justice and equitable development. So if a company takes a child's perspective when it comes to climate action, you have a great starting point for creating a truly sustainable strategy for your future, as well as for children's futures. The final area that we wanted to share with you today is on the marketplace, as I said. So to recap, marketplace has to do with marketing, advertising, communications that involve children in different ways or that reaches children, as well as how products and services impact children's lives. And this is the lowest scoring area in the whole report. And it's not only companies that could be seen as sort of further away from children or from consumers that are scoring low on these indicators. And we fear that this is a disregard when it comes to the risk that a company has in relation to children. But it's also a missed opportunity in relation to how you can use products and services to support children's rights and your business. And we do find some examples though, and we wanted to share them with you. So here I've taken a few examples from different sectors and different issues that they focus on to show an array of examples. So one of them is Vodafone, who especially now during the pandemic has focused on providing online education platforms, both as a social initiative, but also as a commercial solution. The pharmaceutical company Merck from Germany, who has a program that focuses on developing treatments for rare diseases that impacts children. IKEA, who involve children in their product development and even have children design some of their products. General Mills, who is raising the standards when it comes to marketing, both marketing to children and products that children consume, and are applying the highest standards across their markets, independently of the standards that are being applied there. And finally, we have H&M, who has a new initiative where they focus on providing positive role models and messaging to children to support their self-esteem and development through their external communications. So these are just some examples, and there are more. But if you want to read on them, we have a special case on Vodafone also on the report page that you can check out. So what can you do then? Well, what we see is that knowing your impact is important, because if you know how you impact children's lives and how they impact your business, you can focus in the right places. You can minimize your risks and maximize your opportunities. And to start off this journey, you can use your scorecard or the self-assessment that I mentioned. And if you don't already have access to this, you can use the same contact as was shared in the chat before, a benchmark at globalchildforum.org, and we'll help you out. The second step is to realize that children are your stakeholders. and interact with them in different ways. This will give you a unique perspective on their needs and wants, but also make you able to protect their specific vulnerabilities in a much better way. And we have different guidances and tools on this, but I wanted to highlight one here, the Children's Rights in Business Workbook, that I know that Norsk Hydro has also been using. So Åsne will tell you more about that. And we'll share the link to this as well. And finally, what we also see is that when companies speak about children's rights publicly, they drive progress. So what you can do is you can share your score, you can share information about the benchmark. And if you have been benchmarked, we have a communications toolkit that we're also sharing the link in this chat now, I think. Otherwise, you can share information about the benchmark and the results. And we have a hashtag GCF Benchmark 21. And you can also follow our accounts and just share that information. And now I will hand it over to Åsne.
Thank you, Nina. I'm just going to try to share my screen here. All right. So first of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you today and to be able to support the Global Child Forum's work. We've had a long collaboration with Global Child Forum. We've participated in the benchmark survey for several years. We've contributed to forum events in the past. We've provided information from our operations in Northern Brazil for a forum report. And this year, we've also been part of the forum's business sounding board. This has been a fruitful relationship, and I hope to be able to explain to you why this has been so helpful for us. Hydro is an aluminium and energy company. We have operations in about 40 countries, and we have around 30,000 employees. So that means that we operate it in many different parts of the world, and we have to tailor our community relations and how we approach children to the different places where we operate. We have a long tradition of supporting children and children's development, and in our strategy for social responsibility, sustainability development goal number 4 on good education is one of our 3 pillars. And that basically means that we have many initiatives and educational projects aligned to this pillar across our 40 countries. Among others, we have a great collaboration and partnership with UNICEF. And on this picture that I brought with me today, I wanted to give you one of our examples. This is an after-school program that we run together with an implementation partner in one of the communities where we operate in northern Brazil. We work together with the government to put this in place and really strengthen the government to be able to run this program. But basically in this area, there's a big need for after-school programs. On the one hand, to keep children off the street, but also to help continue their education outside of school as well, and to give them build more self-esteem and really contribute to better social inclusion. At the same time, we have seen a need to raise children's and young people's rights even more in Hydro's work with social responsibility. To give you some background data, UNICEF estimates that more than 160 million children worldwide were in child labor in 2020. And obviously with the impacts of COVID-19, they estimate that a further 9 million children will be pushed into child labor by next year. And knowing this data, we at Hydro, we want to find ways to safeguard children's rights even better in our own operations and in our supply chain. And so based on that, we've established a program that will help us think a little bit more holistically about how we as an industrial company can support children and young people's rights. And as you can see on the slide here, the program organizes our efforts along 4 objectives, and we landed on 4 enablers in the end. And obviously this program is grounded in the Children's Rights and Business Principles, which Filipa mentioned at the beginning of this call. And the 4 objectives that we have, they align with workplace, supply chain, community and environment, and marketplace. And then we have enablers on policies and processes, so our internal policies and processes, how we collaborate, for example, with UNICEF and Global Child Forum, how we ensure participation of young people and children, and then social development programs like the one from Northern Brazil that I gave you as an example. And so this program, we developed it based on where we see the biggest risks of adverse impact on children, but also where we believe we can actually make a positive impact. And the idea here is that each objective has actions for improvements, and then we're putting in place a governance system in order to really follow up these actions. And we hope that by structuring our work around children's rights, we can create more awareness in our organization and ultimately strengthen our ability to safeguard and support children's rights. And I think, the key here is that on our journey, moving from sort of a traditional community investment perspective and over to a more sort of holistic strategic program, the benchmark has been very important. I'd also like to highlight the Global Child Forum's workbook for business, which has already been mentioned now a couple of times. It's obviously aligned to the benchmark, but it really it helped us with some of those steps to actually come to this type of sort of holistic program for our company. And I think, you'll recognize here on this slide that our objectives are very closely aligned to the topics from the benchmark. And that's no coincidence. And for a business company like ours, it can be easy to not prioritize the impact that we can have on children in terms of advertisement, marketing, and products. But I think the benchmark is sort of a continuous reminder that we have improvements there, and also why we said that it was important to have marketplace as an objective area, even though we're a business-to-business company. To close off for today, our relationship with the Global Child Forum has been very important for us, like I said, to move from sort of a traditional community investment perspective and over to a larger program. We obviously have a lot of learning to do and a lot of work to do when it comes to children's rights. And so we really look forward to the continuation with the forum. And with that, I'll hand it over to Diveke from NBM, who I'm sure will give us another perspective on this.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure for us to be here today and to celebrate the launch of the 2021 Global Child Forum benchmark. So children's rights has been a key focus area for MBBM for well over a decade now. We are a fund for future generations of Norwegians. And the fund identified early on a need to be specific about the business impacts on children's rights and the financial risks in that regard, because children are particularly vulnerable. So I guess you could say that child rights are relevant both to our value as well as our values as a long-term financial investor. We believe that respecting children's rights lies at the heart of responsible business conduct, and that it requires a broad understanding and response from companies. And this is also why we formulated expectations of companies on children's rights already back in 2008 as one of our first ESG priority efforts. And this early priority was really due to the importance of children's rights for long-term returns, but also due to the opportunity to address systemic risk, both by identifying companies and sectors within our own portfolio and by working with other investors. So our expectations on children's rights, they form the basis for the dialogue that we have with the companies that we are invested in, and they're also updated on a regular basis. So moving perhaps from a sort of initial focus mainly on child labor to now also include expectations of companies that impact children in other ways, for example, through the goods and services that they provide or through the marketing of these. And today, our expectations there are aligned with the UN guiding principles and the child rights and business principles, like the Global Child Forum benchmark. And we expect companies to identify, assess, and manage risks related to children's rights through a comprehensive and ongoing human rights due diligence process. So let me turn to speak about the importance of data, and I want to mention two developments in this regard. And the first is with MBIM, we have a very strong focus on active ownership as part of our responsible investment work. And in order to exercise ownership effectively, we need to know, and we need the data that can show us which of the 9,000 companies in our portfolio are most exposed to risks related to children's rights. And we also need data that can tell us how these companies are managing this risk. And we use this data in various ways. We use it to hold companies to account, for example, through our voting process. And we use it to identify the companies to engage with through our ownership dialogues. We then sort of follow up both companies that are lagging on this issue, as well as the leaders on company disclosure. And this really helps us have a view on the sort of risks within our own portfolio. And it also helps us sort of prioritize and target our engagement efforts to improve disclosure and management where we see that that's necessary. And then secondly, I think we've also seen over the last years a change in how the private sector interacts with children, where an increasing sort of proportion of schooling and entertainment and peer interaction is facilitated by companies. And we think that investors should therefore ensure that their efforts also reflect these sort of evolving challenges associated with children's rights. And for MBIM, this has meant engaging with companies directly and through industry initiatives on a wider range of topics than before. So including topics such as child safety online, the right to nutrition and health, responsible marketing towards children, in addition to our work on child labour. And this broader approach to children's rights, it requires, of course, then also a wider set of data. So as an investor, we therefore appreciate the Global Child Forum benchmarks. They shed light on company policies and practices on children's rights in a clear and applicable manner to investors, spanning across children's interaction with the workplace and the marketplace and communities. And by increasing our own knowledge of company practices on children's rights, we can also be more mindful of how we integrate children's rights in our investment analysis, in our risk monitoring, and in our ownership efforts. But maybe to conclude on the point of data with a sort of a practical example of how we've used it in the last year. So last year, we started an engagement with companies in the telecommunications sector to understand how they approach child safety online. And so we wanted to enhance our own understanding of the sort of types of policies and systems that they have in place. And we also wanted to encourage these companies to take a child rights lens to their human rights due diligence. And I think that the Global Child Forum benchmarks have been very helpful in identifying and assessing the progress of the companies that we engage with in the specific dialogue. And the fact that the benchmarks also go back several years enables us to also, of course, track progress over time. So maybe to conclude and also look a bit ahead, I think one of the key challenges for investors is also to be able to measure company performance on children's rights. And here we do value the steps taken by the Global Child Forum to also include indicators on programs and projects that track company efforts on children's rights that go beyond just disclosure. I can also say that for MBIM, we will aim to integrate the Global Child Forum benchmarks to an even greater extent in both our ownership work and our more sort of analytical work. We are right now internally revising our own methodology for the sustainability assessments that we do of companies in the portfolio, and we'll aim to align our own methodology with that of the Global Child Forum benchmark going forward. So with that, congratulations again on the launch. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today, and I'll hand it back to you, Philippa.
Thank you so much, Divike. I was very, very happy and interested to listen to your speak today. I think what we and all the listeners are really appreciating is the way that you integrate a wider view on children's rights into decision-making and managing risk in your portfolio. I really like the way you speak about how this contributes both to the value in terms of profits and values of your work. I'd like to thank you, Divike, and all the other speakers for your contributions to this event, and also for your extremely valuable cooperation with us for children. We're going to move on immediately. This is a fast-forward event. Don't miss to look out for our next Global Child Forum report launch in 2022, when we publish a deep dive benchmark of the global tech and telecom sector. And in the meanwhile, we're hoping to collaborate with you. You'll see a slide where there are some contact details to reach us. Are you an asset manager or asset owner and wish to access our data? Please do get in touch with us. You can use the generic email or try to reach Matt Goodwin, who is our Sustainable Finance Manager. Have you been benchmarked by us and wish to access your scorecard? Or perhaps you haven't been benchmarked but would like to compare your company to your peers. Or you are a financial analyst interested in knowing more about a company that we haven't benchmarked. Then you can make use of our digital self-assessment. All of these things are available a mere email away, benchmark@globalchildforum.org. And I was very happy to read in the chat of this meeting that we heard from Javier from Fundação Arcor in Argentina that they had already tested the self-assessment, and we're very much looking forward to your feedback. And so to conclude, we hope that this event is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, so don't be afraid to reach out to us. And that's it for today. Have a lovely day and evening.